The morning sun had barely touched the horizon when the first explosions shook Ridge. Han jerked awake in his bunk, his heart already racing before his mind fully understood what was happening. The alarm sirens started screaming a moment later, their wailing cry echoing through the metal corridors of the medical station. He rolled out of bed and grabbed his gear in one smooth motion, trained reflexes taking over. Around him, other medics were doing the same, pulling on their armor and checking their medical kits. The senior field surgeon was already fully dressed and shouting orders. "This is not a drill. Forces are hitting the eastern perimeter. All medical personnel to your stations." His hands moved automatically, strapping on his chest plate and slinging his medical bag over his shoulder. His friend Lee appeared at his side, pale but steady. They had joined the Galactic Coalition Defense Force together 3 years ago, two young men from who wanted to see the stars. Now those stars were falling on them in the form of plasma fire. "Stay close," told his friend, nodded, gripping his rifle tight. They ran through the corridors toward the eastern section of the colony. The walls shook with each impact. Dust fell from the ceiling. Through the windows, could see the sky lit up with weapons fire, bright streaks of energy cutting through the dawn. Ships were burning in the atmosphere, trailing smoke as they fell. The medical station was chaos. Wounded soldiers were already being carried in on stretchers. Saw species he had trained with, fought beside, now bleeding and broken. And Soldier lay on a table, her insect-like body twitching in pain. A saurian clutched his side where scales had been burned away. Two humans screamed as medics worked on their legs. Grabbed his arm. "Take your kit and head to Bunker 7. They need a medic up there now." He nodded and ran, and two other soldiers fell in behind him as escorts. The bunkers were forward positions, closer to the fighting, closer to danger, but that was where the wounded would be. They emerged from the colony's main structure into the open air. The smell hit immediately, that terrible mix of burning metal, ozone from energy weapons, and something worse, the smell of burned flesh. The ground was scorched in places, still smoking from plasma impacts. Bunker 7 was 200 meters ahead, built into the ridge itself. Could see soldiers firing from its positions, bright flashes of their weapons against the dawn. Beyond them, in the valley below, the forces advanced. They looked like moving shadows, dark armor absorbing the early light. Their weapons made a distinctive crack when they fired, and heard those cracks getting closer. A plasma bolt screamed past his head. He dove behind a supply crate, his escorts returning fire. The world became noise and light, impossible to think through, but had trained for this. He waited for a gap in the fire, then sprinted forward. His boots pounded the hard ground. His breath came in gasps. 20 meters. 10. He slid through the bunker entrance just as another explosion rocked the ridge behind him. Inside, it was worse than he expected. 5 soldiers lay wounded, with only one medic trying to help them all. The medic, a young whose crystalline body was cracked and dim, looked up with relief in her faceted eyes. "Thank the stars," she said in accented standard. "I cannot do this alone." Dropped to his knees beside the nearest wounded soldier and opened his kit. A human private, maybe 20 years old, had taken shrapnel to the chest. Hands moved fast, cutting away the uniform, applying pressure, injecting painkiller and clotting agent. The private gasped and grabbed his arm. "Am I going to die?" "Not today," said firmly. "I've got you." He worked through them one by one, prioritizing by severity. The medic helped, her delicate crystal fingers perfect for precise work. Outside, the sounds of battle grew louder. Sergeant, the squad leader, shouted orders in her clicking language. Her soldiers fired in disciplined bursts, trying to hold the line. Then the world exploded. The bunker shook violently. Part of the ceiling collapsed, threw himself over his patient as debris rained down. When the dust cleared, his ears were ringing and blood ran down his face from a cut on his forehead. He wiped it away and looked around. The bunker entrance was partially blocked. Through the gap, he could see soldiers advancing. They were close now, too close. Sergeant clicked rapidly into her communicator, then turned to her squad. "Fall back, we cannot hold this position." The soldiers began retreating, carrying what wounded they could. Helped lift the private he had been treating, getting the young man's arm over his shoulder, appeared and took the other side. Together they started toward the exit. That was when heard it, a sound that made his blood freeze, a cry for help from deeper in the bunker, from a section that had collapsed. He stopped, looked at him with wide eyes. "We have to go now," but was already moving back toward the sound. He found them in what had been a side chamber, 6 soldiers trapped under fallen beams and rubble. They were alive but hurt badly, and with her thorax crushed. 2 humans burned by plasma fire, a saurian missing an arm, a with shattered limbs, and a species of living gas whose containment suit was cracked and leaking. "Help us," one of the humans gasped. "Please." Looked back at the entrance. The other soldiers were gone, already retreating. They were maybe 30 seconds away. He could hear their boots on the ground, their harsh voices calling to each other. Every instinct told him to run, to save himself. But he thought of his sister. Her name had been. She had died when he was 17, collapsing suddenly from a heart defect he did not know she had. He had held her, helpless, watching the life leave her eyes. He had not been able to save her. He had not known how. That was why he became a medic, so he would never be helpless again. Dropped his patient gently and turned back to the trapped soldiers. "What are you doing?" shouted from the entrance. "We have to leave." "Get him out of here," said, gesturing to the private. "I'll be right behind you." "You're lying." "I know, now go." Hesitated one more second, his face twisted with anguish. Then he dragged the wounded private toward the exit. Heard him shouting for help, for someone to come back. But no one would, no one could. They were too close. Turned to the trapped soldiers and knelt beside them. His hands were steady as he opened his medical kit again. Outside, the sound of enemy boots grew louder. The first shadow appeared at the bunker entrance. Looked at the 6 wounded soldiers, at their terrified faces, at the hope in their eyes that someone had not abandoned them. He thought of acceptable losses, of tactical retreats, of the cold mathematics of war that said some people could not be saved. He thought of his sister. Then Han made his choice. He would not leave them. He would shield them or die trying. And as the soldiers entered the bunker, he placed himself between them and the wounded, raised his rifle, and prepared to make his stand. The morning sun had barely touched the horizon when the first explosions shook Ridge. Han jerked awake in his bunk, his heart already racing before his mind fully understood what was happening. The alarm sirens started screaming a moment later, their wailing cry echoing through the metal corridors of the medical station. He rolled out of bed and grabbed his gear in one smooth motion, trained reflexes taking over. Around him, other medics were doing the same, pulling on their armor and checking their medical kits. The senior field surgeon was already fully dressed and shouting orders. "This is not a drill. Forces are hitting the eastern perimeter. All medical personnel to your stations." His hands moved automatically, strapping on his chest plate and slinging his medical bag over his shoulder. His friend Lee appeared at his side, pale but steady. They had joined the Galactic Coalition Defense Force together 3 years ago, 2 young men from who wanted to see the stars. Now those stars were falling on them in the form of plasma fire. "Stay close," told his friend, nodded, gripping his rifle tight. They ran through the corridors toward the eastern section of the colony. The walls shook with each impact. Dust fell from the ceiling. Through the windows, could see the sky lit up with weapons fire, bright streaks of energy cutting through the dawn. Ships were burning in the atmosphere, trailing smoke as they fell. The medical station was chaos. Wounded soldiers were already being carried in on stretchers. Saw species he had trained with, fought beside, now bleeding and broken. And soldier lay on a table, her insect-like body twitching in pain. A saurian clutched his side where scales had been burned away. Two humans screamed as medics worked on their legs. Grabbed his arm. "Take your kit and head to Bunker 7. They need a medic up there now." He nodded and ran, and two other soldiers fell in behind him as escorts. The bunkers were forward positions, closer to the fighting, closer to danger, but that was where the wounded would be. They emerged from the colony's main structure into the open air. The smell hit immediately, that terrible mix of burning metal, ozone from energy weapons, and something worse, the smell of burned flesh. The ground was scorched in places, still smoking from plasma impacts. Bunker 7 was 200 meters ahead, built into the ridge itself. Could see soldiers firing from its positions, bright flashes of their weapons against the dawn. Beyond them, in the valley below, the forces advanced. They looked like moving shadows, dark armor absorbing the early light. Their weapons made a distinctive crack when they fired, and heard those cracks getting closer. A plasma bolt screamed past his head. He dove behind a supply crate, his escorts returning fire. The world became noise and light, impossible to think through, but had trained for this. He waited for a gap in the fire, then sprinted forward. His boots pounded the hard ground. His breath came in gasps. 20 meters. 10. He slid through the bunker entrance just as another explosion rocked the ridge behind him. Inside, it was worse than he expected. 5 soldiers lay wounded, with only one medic trying to help them all. The medic, a young whose crystalline body was cracked and dim, looked up with relief in her faceted eyes. "Thank the stars," she said in accented standard. "I cannot do this alone." Dropped to his knees beside the nearest wounded soldier and opened his kit. A human private, maybe 20 years old, had taken shrapnel to the chest. Hands moved fast, cutting away the uniform, applying pressure, injecting painkiller and clotting agent. The private gasped and grabbed his arm. "Am I going to die?" "Not today," said firmly. "I've got you." He worked through them one by one, prioritizing by severity. The medic helped, her delicate crystal fingers perfect for precise work. Outside, the sounds of battle grew louder. Sergeant, the squad leader, shouted orders in her clicking language. Her soldiers fired in disciplined bursts, trying to hold the line. Then the world exploded. The bunker shook violently. Part of the ceiling collapsed. Threw himself over his patient as debris rained down. When the dust cleared, his ears were ringing and blood ran down his face from a cut on his forehead. He wiped it away and looked around. The bunker entrance was partially blocked. Through the gap, he could see soldiers advancing. They were close now, too close. Sergeant clicked rapidly into her communicator, then turned to her squad. "Fall back, we cannot hold this position." The soldiers began retreating, carrying what wounded they could. Helped lift the private he had been treating, getting the young man's arm over his shoulder. Appeared and took the other side. Together they started toward the exit. That was when heard it, a sound that made his blood freeze, a cry for help from deeper in the bunker, from a section that had collapsed. He stopped, looked at him with wide eyes. "We have to go now," but was already moving back toward the sound. He found them in what had been a side chamber, 6 soldiers trapped under fallen beams and rubble. They were alive but hurt badly, and with her thorax crushed. 2 humans burned by plasma fire, a saurian missing an arm, a with shattered limbs, and a species of living gas whose containment suit was cracked and leaking. "Help us," one of the humans gasped. "Please." Looked back at the entrance. The other soldiers were gone, already retreating. They were maybe 30 seconds away. He could hear their boots on the ground, their harsh voices calling to each other. Every instinct told him to run, to save himself. But he thought of his sister. Her name had been. She had died when he was 17, collapsing suddenly from a heart defect he did not know she had. He had held her, helpless, watching the life leave her eyes. He had not been able to save her. He had not known how. That was why he became a medic, so he would never be helpless again. dropped his patient gently, and turned back to the trapped soldiers. "What are you doing?" shouted from the entrance. "We have to leave." "Get him out of here," said, gesturing to the private. "I'll be right behind you." "You're lying." "I know, now go." Hesitated one more second, his face twisted with anguish. Then he dragged the wounded private toward the exit, heard him shouting for help, for someone to come back, but no one would, no one could. They were too close. Turned to the trapped soldiers and knelt beside them. His hands were steady as he opened his medical kit again. Outside, the sound of enemy boots grew louder. The first shadow appeared at the bunker entrance. Looked at the 6 wounded soldiers, at their terrified faces, at the hope in their eyes that someone had not abandoned them. He thought of acceptable losses, of tactical retreats, of the cold mathematics of war that said some people could not be saved. He thought of his sister. Then Han made his choice. He would not leave them. He would shield them or die trying. And as the soldiers entered the bunker, he placed himself between them and the wounded, raised his rifle, and prepared to make his stand. The soldier who stepped forward was larger than the others, his armor marked with symbols that probably meant rank. He carried a blade in addition to his rifle, a curved thing that looked designed for close combat. He said something in his language, low and almost gentle. Did not understand the words, but he understood the tone. It was the sound of someone who respected his opponent, who regretted what came next, who would kill him anyway because that was war. The large raised his blade, tightened his grip on the metal beam. His left arm hung useless. His leg barely held his weight. Blood loss was making him dizzy, his thoughts slow. But he stayed on his feet. He stayed between the enemy and the wounded. Then the world exploded for the second time that day. The blast came from outside, massive and concussive. It threw everyone to the ground, and human alike. Ears rang so badly he could not hear anything else. Through the bunker entrance he saw fire and smoke, saw soldiers scattered like toys. Heavy weapons fire, coalition forces, the reinforcements had arrived. What happened next was chaos. Coalition soldiers poured into the area, their weapons cutting down the surprised forces. Sergeant was among them, her insect mandibles clicking rapid orders. Behind her came more soldiers, more medics, more hope. But did not see any of this clearly. His vision was fading, going dark at the edges. He tried to stay standing, tried to remain between the wounded and danger, but his legs finally gave out. He collapsed forward, falling across the soldier with the crushed thorax. The last thing he remembered was her clicking softly, a sound that meant gratitude in her language. Then darkness took him. He woke briefly in a transport, pain screaming through every nerve. His face swam above him, tight with concentration as she worked on his wounds. She was talking fast to someone, using medical terms he could not follow in his current state. "The wounded," he tried to say. "Did they?" "All alive," said quickly. "Because of you, now stop talking and let me work." Darkness again. The next time consciousness found him, he was in a proper medical facility. Machines beeped around him. Tubes ran into his arms. Everything hurt in a distant, drugged way. He tried to move and could not. Panic seized him until he realized he was in medical restraints, probably to keep him from damaging himself during treatment. A face appeared above him. Lee, his friend, his brother in all but blood. Eyes were red like he had been crying. His hand found and gripped it tight. "You stupid, brave, impossible man," whispered. "I thought you were dead. I thought I watched you die." Tried to smile but was not sure if his face obeyed. The wounded. "All 6 survived. All 6. The doctors say you kept them alive long enough for the rescue. They say it's a miracle." "Not a miracle, just stubborn." Laughed a broken sound. "They got it on video. The battlefield drones, they recorded everything. People are watching it across the entire coalition. You're famous." "Don't want famous, want sleep." "Then sleep. I'll be here when you wake." But sleep did not come easily anymore. Over the following days, as his body slowly healed, learned the full scope of what had happened at Ridge. The battle had been a turning point. The Empire had committed significant forces to taking the colony, seeing it as a strategic target. The coalition had been close to losing, close to ordering a full evacuation. But something had changed in those desperate hours. The video of his stand had spread through military channels during the battle itself. Soldiers had watched a human medic, wounded, and refused to abandon the helpless. Something about it had struck a nerve across multiple species. The coalition forces had fought harder, had refused to give ground. Commander the Saurian who oversaw the colony defense came to visit personally. The old warrior stood beside the medical bed, his scales marked with age and battle. "In my culture," said in his deep voice, "there is a concept. It translates poorly, but the closest would be soul fire. It means the inner light that defines a person, that makes them who they truly are. I have seen many warriors in my long life. I have seen courage and sacrifice. But what you did, young human, that was soul fire burning bright enough to light the darkness for all of us." Did not know what to say to that. He was just a medic from who had been too stubborn to leave people behind. The 6 soldiers he saved came to see him, one by one. The with the crushed thorax now breathing easier with medical support. The 2 burned humans, their faces wrapped in healing bandages. The Saurian named, fitted with a cybernetic arm. Her crystalline body reinforced with special polymers. The called in a new containment suit, his colors bright and vivid. Each one thanked him. Each one told him they owed him their life. One of the burned humans gripped his hand with fierce strength. "I have a daughter," said, his voice thick with emotion. "She's 3 years old. Because of you, I'll get to see her again. Because of you, she'll have a father. How do I ever repay that?" "Live well," said simply, "that's enough." But it was not enough for them, or for the military, or apparently for the entire galactic coalition. Messages poured in from worlds he had never visited, from species he had barely heard of. Military analysts were calling his actions the stand, and using it as an example in tactical courses, though not for the tactics but for the spirit behind them. "They're talking about giving you the Coalition Star of Valor," told him one day during her rounds. She had been promoted to Chief Medical Officer for her work during the battle. "It's never been awarded to a human before." "I don't want medals." "Too bad, you're getting them anyway." She checked his vital signs and made notes on her tablet. "Your recovery is progressing, but it'll be slow. You took a lot of damage. Neural trauma, internal injuries, severe blood loss. You'll need months of therapy." "Will I be able to return to duty?" Was quiet for a long moment. "Physically, maybe, but you don't have to. You've done enough, more than enough. You could take a medical discharge, go home to Earth, live in peace." He thought about that, thought about the ocean, about a life without war. It was tempting. But he also thought about the young medics who would come after him, who would face their own impossible choices, who would need to know that sometimes you stayed, even when staying meant dying. "I'll think about it," he said. 3 months passed. Months of surgeries and therapy, of learning to walk without limping, of nights where he woke screaming from dreams of fire and blood. Lee stayed with him through all of it, a constant presence. Park Myra, his old training partner, visited from her posting on another world. She sat beside his bed and held his hand, tears in her eyes. "I told you once that sometimes all we can offer is our presence and our courage," she said. "I never imagined you would take it so literally. You were a good teacher. And you were an even better student." The day finally came when the doctors cleared him for discharge. He could walk without support now, though his left shoulder would never regain full strength. The scars would fade but never disappear. The nightmares might never stop. But he was alive, and so were 6 others who should not be. Came to his room that morning with his dress uniform cleaned and pressed. "You're being discharged today. There's a small ceremony, Just formal stuff shouldn't take long. Dressed slowly, his fingers clumsy with the unfamiliar formal buttons. He had expected this to be simple. Sign some papers, shake some hands, go home or return to duty, whatever came next. He had no idea what was actually waiting for him outside. The medical facility's corridors were strangely empty as led him toward the main entrance. Found this odd. The place was usually busy, full of staff and patients. Now it felt like everyone had vanished. His footsteps echoed on the polished floor. "Where is everyone?" he asked. "Outside," said she would not meet his eyes, "for the ceremony." "It's that big of a deal." She smiled but said nothing. They stopped at a set of large doors, waited there dressed in his own formal uniform. His friend smiled when he saw, but there was something nervous in it, something anticipating. Reddy asked, "For a ceremony, I guess. How long is this going to take?" "Longer than you think." Took position on one side while moved to the other. Together they pushed open the doors. The sound hit first, a roar of noise that made him step back, overwhelming and immediate. Then his eyes adjusted to the bright daylight and he saw them. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. They filled the parade ground in front of the medical facility, stretched back as far as he could see. Soldiers from every species in the coalition standing in formation, with their chitinous bodies gleaming, saurians with scales of every color, crystalline forms catching and splitting the light, in their containment suits hovering above the ground, and humans, so many humans, standing alongside their alien comrades. Behind them were civilians, members of the press, diplomats, children held on parents' shoulders. Ships hovered in the sky above, their hulls displaying holographic messages he could not read from this distance. At the front of the formation stood the 6 soldiers he had saved. They wore full dress uniform, their bodies bearing the marks of their injuries but standing proud and strong. Behind them, sergeant, commander, and officers from a dozen different species stood frozen in the doorway. His mind could not process what he was seeing. This was not a small ceremony. This was not signing papers and shaking hands. "What is this?" he whispered. "This is everyone who wanted to thank you," said quietly. "And we ran out of space. There are millions more watching on broadcast." A Saurian commander stepped forward, his voice amplified to carry across the field. It was Commander, looking older and more formal than when he had visited the medical room. "Honor to Han Doyun," roared, "the shield of Krston Ridge." The response shook the ground. Every soldier, every species, responded in their own way. They clicked their mandibles in a rhythmic pattern that sounded like thunder. The saurians beat their tails against the earth in time. They pulsed with light, creating waves of color that swept across the formation. They generated harmonic frequencies that made the air vibrate. The humans stood at rigid attention, many with tears streaming down their faces. And they were all saluting, every single one of them. 2 soldiers appeared at sides. They were honor guards, one human and one. They gestured forward, indicating he should walk. His legs moved automatically, carrying him down the steps and toward the assembly, and followed behind. The path through the formation seemed endless. As he walked, heard his name repeated in dozens of languages, in clicks and roars and whistles and spoken words. Han, 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 not his rank, not medic or soldier. His name. They knew his name. He reached the front where the 6 saved soldiers waited. The Saurian with the new cybernetic arm stepped forward first. He placed his clawed hand over his heart in the gesture of his people. "I am son of warrior of the Bronze Scale clan," he said formally. "I was dead. You would not allow it. My life is yours, Han. My blade is yours. My honor is yours." With the repaired thorax came next. Remembered how she had clicked gratefully as he fell across her. Now she stood straight and strong. "I am of the 3rd hive." Her voice translator rendered her clicks into standard. "In my culture, one who saves a life becomes clan. You are hive brother now, Han. We sing your name in the deep places." One by one they spoke, they whose name was a frequency could not pronounce but who told him to call her Crystal, the whose colors swirled with joy, the burned human who had a picture of his daughter in his hand. "She drew you a picture," said, his voice breaking. "She's 3, she doesn't understand war or medals, but she knows you saved her daddy. She says you're a hero." The last to speak was the other burned human, a young woman named Park. She had been the one screaming in pain, the one had drugged heavily to keep quiet. Her face was still bandaged but healing. "I wanted to die," she said simply. "The pain was so bad, I was ready for it to end. But you wouldn't let me, you stayed. And because you stayed, I'm here. Thank you for not giving up on me." Commander stepped forward then, carrying a small box. He opened it to reveal a medal had only seen in pictures. The Coalition Star of Valor, the highest honor the Galactic Coalition could bestow. A crystalline star surrounded by medals from a dozen. "This medal has been awarded only 17 times in the history of the Coalition," said. "Never to a human. Until now. Han, for extraordinary valor beyond the call of duty, for selfless sacrifice in defense of those who could not defend themselves, for embodying the highest ideals of the Galactic Coalition, it is my profound honor to present you with the Star of Valor." Pinned the medal to his chest. Then the old Saurian warrior did something unprecedented. He saluted, a commander saluting a corporal. The symbolism was clear to everyone watching. A holographic display activated above them, showing the face of the Coalition Council's leader, a wise old whose crystalline form had survived 3 centuries. "Corporal Han," the voice resonated with harmonics that touched something deep in everyone who heard it. "What you did at Ridge will be studied for generations, not for tactical brilliance but for moral clarity. In a moment when calculation said to retreat, when logic said to save yourself, when every rational voice said those 6 lives were lost, you said no. You said every life matters. You said these people, these beings of different species and cultures, were worth dying for. In that moment you showed us what the Coalition should be, what we must be. Thank you." The hologram faded. Commander raised his hand, and the entire assembly fell silent. Han said, "Is there anything you wish to say?" Looked out at the thousands of faces, the multitude of species, all waiting for his words. His mind was overwhelmed, his thoughts scattered. What could he possibly say that would be adequate to this moment? He thought of his sister, of holding her as she died, of feeling helpless. He thought of beside him through everything, of teaching him to be better than he was, of Park Myra telling him that presence and courage were sometimes all you could offer. He thought of 6 wounded soldiers in a collapsing bunker, and the simple choice to stay. His voice was quiet when he spoke, but the amplifiers carried it to everyone. "I am not special," he said. "I am just a medic who was too stubborn to leave. My sister died when I was young. I couldn't save her. Maybe that's why I can't walk away when others need help. Maybe it's just stubbornness. But I think every species here understands loss, understands the pain of losing someone you love. And I think every species here understands the desire to prevent that pain when you can." He paused, gathering his thoughts. War is about numbers, about acceptable losses and tactical retreats, about the greater good. But every one of those numbers is a person, someone's brother or sister, someone's parent or child, someone's friend. If we forget that, if we start seeing beings as just numbers, we've already lost what makes us worth fighting for. He looked directly at the 6 soldiers he had saved. "I didn't save 6 numbers that day. I saved an crystal and I saved 6 people who matter, who have families and dreams and futures. That's not heroism. That's just basic decency. That's what anyone should do." The silence was complete, then started clapping. It spread through the humans first, then to other species in their own ways. The applause built until it seemed to shake the sky itself. Park Myra appeared from the crowd, walking toward him with her arms spread. He met her halfway and they embraced, 2 old friends who had trained together and who both understood the weight of healing hands. You did good, she whispered in his ear. You did so good. The ceremony continued but barely registered it. There were more speeches, more honors, more formal protocols. His mind was elsewhere, processing everything, trying to understand how his life had brought him to this moment. Eventually it ended. The formations dispersed. People came forward to shake his hand, to touch him, to simply stand near him. He met soldiers from worlds he had never heard of who told him his story had inspired them. He met parents who thanked him for showing their children what courage looked like. He met beings of species he could not identify who simply wanted to express gratitude in their own ways. As the sun set over the parade ground, found himself sitting on the steps watching the last of the crowd disperse. He was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. What happens now? He asked. You tell me, replied. You could retire, live off this fame, write books or give speeches. That sounds terrible. I thought you'd say that, grinned. They're offering you a training position, teaching new medics, passing on what you know. Thought about it. Thought about young medics who would face their own impossible choices, who would need to understand that the choice to stay, to fight for every life, was always worth making. Yeah, he said, I could do that. Good stood and offered his hand. Come on, is holding a dinner for close friends. Real food, not medical facility stuff, and no more ceremonies, I promise. Took his friend's hand and let himself be pulled to his feet. His left shoulder twinged but held. His body was but functional. His mind was tired but clear. He had saved 6 lives, and in doing so somehow, he had changed something larger than himself. As he walked away with his friends, he thought about tomorrow, about the students he would teach, about the lessons they would need to learn, about how every life, every single one, was worth shielding, even if it cost you everything. 5 years had passed since Ridge. Han stood at the front of a classroom on Coalition Training Station Harmony, looking at 30 faces representing 15 different species. Young medics, fresh from basic training, eager and nervous in equal measure. Some had skin, some had scales, some had bodies made of crystal or contained gas, but they all had the same look in their eyes that he remembered having once, a lifetime ago. Combat medicine is different from civilian medicine, he told them, keeping his voice level and clear. In a hospital you have resources, you have time, you have backup. In combat you have whatever is in your kit, whatever seconds the enemy gives you, and yourself. That's it. He walked along the front of the room, noting how some students leaned forward, how others took notes, how a few looked uncertain. Good. They should be uncertain. Medicine was serious business. You will face choices out there, he continued. Choices about who to treat first, who can wait, who is beyond saving. These choices will haunt you. They should. The day you can make them without feeling anything is the day you should quit. A hand went up. A young human woman with earnest eyes. Instructor Han, is it true what they say about Ridge, that you refused to abandon wounded soldiers even when you had no chance? Paused, they always asked eventually. His story was taught in every coalition military academy now, analyzed and discussed. The stand of Han, the protocol. He could not escape it. Yes, he said simply. But tactically, wasn't that wrong? The textbooks say you should have retreated, saved yourself to help more people later. The textbooks say a lot of things. Move to the window, looking out at the stars beyond. Tactics are important. Calculation is important, but so is something else, something harder to teach. What's that? The knowledge that you are the last hope for the person in front of you. Right now, in this moment, you are all they have. Will you walk away? Can you? Should you? He turned back to face them. I'm not going to tell you there's a right answer. Every situation is different, but I will tell you this. The day you stop seeing patients as people and start seeing them as numbers is the day you fail as a medic. The class was silent. Then a student, her mandibles clicking thoughtfully, raised a limb. Instructor, you were wounded badly at Ridge. Do you still have pain? Every day, admitted. My left shoulder will never work properly. I have scars that pull when I move certain ways, and I have dreams sometimes, bad ones, about fire and blood and making choices. Do you regret it? He thought about that question, really thought about it. I regret that I was in a situation where that choice was necessary. I regret that 6 people were wounded and trapped. I regret the war that put us all there. But the choice I made to stay, no, I don't regret that. Class ended. The students filed out, some stopping to ask more questions, others simply nodding respectfully as they passed. When the room was finally empty, gathered his materials and prepared to leave. Lee waited in the corridor. His friend had left active combat duty 2 years ago, taking a position as an administrator at the training station. They saw each other almost daily now, falling back into the easy friendship they had always shared. Got a message for you, said. From Ridge. They're dedicating a memorial, want you there for the ceremony. Another ceremony, made a face. You know I hate those. I know, but this one's different. It's not about you. It's about everyone who fought there, everyone who died. You should go. Will you come with me? Obviously, someone has to keep you from running away. They took a transport ship to Ridge 3 days later. The colony had been rebuilt in the years since the battle, grown larger and more prosperous. But the ridge itself had been preserved as it was, ground and damaged structures left as a reminder. The memorial stood where Bunker 7 had been, a tall structure made of materials from every coalition world, reaching toward the sky. Names were inscribed on it, all those who had died in the battle. Hundreds of names, hundreds of people who had not come home. Was there now a chief medical officer with enough rank to make admirals nervous? Park Myra came from her hospital on a distant world. Commander, older now but still strong. And the 6, those who had saved, all of them present, had risen to commander rank, leading Saurian forces with distinction, had returned to her hive and bore children, carrying forward the life had preserved. Crystal worked as a diplomatic liaison, her repaired body a testament to medical science, had become a teacher like training medics, ran a civilian medical clinic, showing his daughter daily what her father did. Park served as a counselor, helping soldiers deal with trauma. They all greeted warmly, old friends reunited. There was hugging and clicking and harmonic sounds, and the simple joy of people who had survived something terrible together. Thank you for coming, said. I know you don't like ceremonies. I came for this, replied, gesturing at the memorial. For them, the ones who didn't make it. The ceremony began. Various speakers talked about the battle, about sacrifice, about the cost of freedom. Listened with half an ear, his attention on the names carved into stone. He had known some of them, had treated some of them, had failed to save some of them. When it came time for him to speak, he walked to the podium and looked out at the assembled crowd. Smaller than the ceremony 5 years ago, but still significant. People wanted to remember, needed to remember. I've been asked to speak about heroism, he began, about courage and sacrifice. But standing here looking at these names, I think we're asking the wrong question. The question isn't what makes someone heroic. The question is, what makes someone worth saving? He paused, letting that sink in. Every name on this memorial represents someone worth saving, someone who mattered, the soldier who stood beside you, the medic who patched your wounds, the engineer who kept the lights on, the civilian who brought water to the injured. Every single one of them had value, had a life that mattered, had people who loved them. At Ridge, we fought for many things: territory, resources, strategic position. But in the end, we fought for each other, human and Ansarian and all the rest. We fought because we looked at the person beside us and said, you matter, you are worth fighting for, you are worth dying for. That's the real lesson of Ridge. Not tactics or strategy, not even courage. The lesson is that every life has value, that we are stronger together than apart, That when we see each other as people, as individuals with names and stories and futures, we become something greater than any single species could be alone. He looked at the 6 people he had saved standing together near the front. I am asked often if I would do it again, if I would make that same choice knowing the cost. The answer is yes, 1,000 times yes, because they are worth it, because every person here is worth it, because that is what makes us the coalition, not our weapons or our ships, but our absolute refusal to accept that anyone is disposable. The crowd was silent, then stepped forward, his commander's uniform crisp and formal. 5 years ago, said, his deep voice carrying across the space, a human medic taught us something we had forgotten. He reminded us why we fight, not for territory or power, but for each other. Today, we honor not just those who died, but the principle they died defending, that every life matters, every single one. He turned to face directly. Han, you carry the Coalition Star of Valor. You carry the gratitude of 6 lives saved. But more than that, you carry a legacy. You showed us who we could be, who we should be, and we are better for it. One by one, others came forward. Soldiers who had served at Ridge, civilians who had been evacuated, children who had been born because their parents survived. Each one shared a brief story, a memory, a thank you. An old Saurian woman approached, moving slowly with age. She placed her clawed hand on his chest, over the scar tissue he knew was there. My grandson was at Ridge, she said. He died in the first wave before you arrived. He was 20 years old. I tell you this not to make you sad, but to say thank you. Thank you for honoring his memory by fighting for the others. Thank you for showing that his life and all the others lost meant something, that they were worth the sacrifice. Felt tears on his face and did not try to hide them. I'm sorry I couldn't save him. You saved who you could. That is enough. That is more than enough. As the sun set over Ridge, painting the ground in orange and gold, the ceremony concluded. People began to disperse, but many stayed, standing near the memorial, reading names, remembering. Found himself standing with the 6, looking up at the structure. And Myra joined them, a circle of friends who had been forged in fire. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had retreated? Asked quietly. If you had followed orders? Sometimes, admitted. But then I look at you all, at your lives, your accomplishments, your families, and I know the choice was right. We've been talking, said her translator, rendering her clicks. The 6 of us, we want to start something, a foundation for combat medics, training, scholarships, research. We want to call it the Foundation. We want you to lead it, added, his colors swirling with enthusiasm. You're already training medics. This would let you do more, help more. Looked at them surprised. I don't know anything about running a foundation. You know about saving lives, said firmly. That's what matters, the rest we can learn. We can't pay you much at first, warned, but it would be meaningful work, important work. Thought about his classroom, his students, the young medics learning to make impossible choices. He thought about how many more he could help with better resources, better training, better support. Okay, he said, let's do it. They talked through the night, making plans, dreaming big. By morning, they had the skeleton of an organization that would eventually train thousands of medics across the coalition. That would fund research into battlefield medicine. That would ensure that the lessons of Ridge spread to every corner of civilized space. 10 years after that night, Han stood once again at the memorial on Ridge. He was older now, gray at his temples, his limp more pronounced. The Foundation had grown beyond his wildest expectations, operating across 60 worlds. He came alone this time, wanting quiet reflection. He walked slowly along the memorial wall, reading names. Some he remembered, most he had never known, all of them mattered. A group of students approached, young medics on a training visit to the historical site. They recognized him immediately. One of them, a brave young, stepped forward. Instructor Han, could we ask you something? Of course. They tell us your story in class, about the choice you made, about staying when everyone else left. And I just want to know if you really think one person can make a difference, if individual choices matter against such big forces. Smiled. It was a question he had heard many times. He gestured at the memorial, at the names carved in stone. Every person here made choices, he said. Some chose to fight, some chose to help, some chose to stand their ground, some chose to retreat so they could fight another day. Every single choice mattered, every single person mattered. He looked at the young students, seeing his own younger self in their eager faces. You are one person, just one, but you will be the only person in that exact place at that exact time when someone needs help. In that moment, you are everything. Your choice is everything. Never forget that. Will we be brave enough, another student asked, when the time comes? I don't know, said honestly. No one knows until they're tested, but I can tell you this, courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite the fear. It's looking at someone who needs help and saying, I will not abandon you. That's all. That's everything. The students thanked him and moved on, eager to explore the site. Remained, standing in the fading light, thinking about paths taken and choices made. His communicator chimed. A message from dinner tonight. Got news about the Foundation's expansion to the outer colonies. Smiled and replied, be there soon. He took one last look at the memorial, at the names that represented so much loss and so much courage. He thought about his sister, gone so many years now, about how her death had shaped his life, had led him here, had made him who he was. I hope I made you proud, he whispered to her memory. Then Han, the Shield of Ridge, teacher of medics, founder of the organization that bore the battle's name, turned and walked away from the memorial. His shoulder ached, his leg hurt, his body carried the scars of that day and would carry them until he died. But 6 people lived because he had stayed. Thousands more lived because of what he taught. And across the coalition, in classrooms and hospitals and battlefields, medics carried forward his lesson, that every life has value, that no one is disposable, that the choice to stay and fight for those who cannot fight for themselves is always, always worth making. He had been one man making one choice in one moment, and somehow, impossibly, it had mattered. It had changed things, not just for 6 people but for everyone. As he boarded his transport back to the training station, thought about tomorrow's class, about the students waiting to learn, about the medics who would carry forward the torch he had lit. One person could make a difference. He had proven it, and now, every day, he worked to teach others that they could too. The transport lifted off, rising above ridge, above the memorial, above the ground where so much had been lost and so much had been saved. Looked down at it one last time, then settled back in his seat and closed his eyes. He had done what he could. He had stayed when others left. He had shielded the wounded from enemy fire, and when he woke from his injuries, every species had saluted him by name. But more important than any of that was what came after, the lives saved by his students, the medics inspired by his example, the people who learned that courage was not the absence of fear but the choice to act despite it. That was his real legacy, not the medal or the fame or the memorial, but the knowledge spreading through the galaxy that every single life was worth fighting for. He smiled and let himself rest, knowing that tomorrow would bring new students, new lessons, new chances to make a difference. One person at a time, one choice at a time, one life at a time. It was enough. It had always been enough. It would always be enough.